March of the Machine spoilers are coming in, and I wanted to take a look at some cards that I found interesting so far. Not in any order, not necessarily a top 10, just some that I wanted to highlight. I'm going to start with the big dinosaur, Etali Primal Conqueror. A 7 mana 7/7 with trample, and when it enters the battlefield, it's like old Etali where you steal the first card from everyone's deck, but it's on an ETB, which I think is actually much better. If you play this in some sort of like teamer, like turbo ramp deck, where you could play it and like flicker it, or 5-color reanimator and get that ETB early, it could be really strong. I like this card a lot. And then for 9 in a green Phyrexian, you can flip it to the other side, which has trample, indestructible, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, they get that many poison counters. And it's an 11/11, so basically like a Blightsteel Colossus. I like this commander a lot, actually. It seems pretty good in just any kind of Gruul Stompy deck. Honestly, I might try and fit it into my Mina and Den list. We'll see. I think it's pretty cool though. Speaking of Gruul legends, Borborygmos and then Fibblethip, making him Teamer, is pretty cool. A 6/5 that when it ETBs or attacks, draw a card, then discard any number of lands. When you discard one or more cards this way, deals twice that much damage to target creature. And then you can put it into your library third from the top. Kind of a neat way in Commander to avoid the Commander tax. If your creature's about to die, you just put it into the library and then draw it later. Probably not a great card, but if you really want to build around like Life from the Loam, which I love, and that kind of seismic assault sort of effect, this could be for you, and it might be for me, because I've been thinking about adding a color to my Mina and Den deck, and Borborygmos is pretty sweet for that. Another Teamer commander, this time from the Commander Precons, Gimbal Gremlin Prodigy, gives your artifact creatures trample, and then at the beginning of your end step, you make a 0/0 Gremlin artifact creature token it, and then it gets X counters on it, where X is the number of differently named artifact tokens you control. So it'll always count itself and be a 1/1 at the very least. I really like this card with like Academy Manufactor, because that easily makes 3 of something, so it'll basically make a 4/4 every turn, and making 4/4s with trample every turn is actually pretty good. We've never really seen Teamer be a popular artifact color, but I think this is a good way to take it, because it's creatures and then you're buffing the creatures. Probably worse than the Esper Urza at the end of the day, but I suppose if you want to do Teamer instead of Esper, I guess this is for you then. Another precon card is Bright Palm Soul Awakener, a fox shaman with backup 1. So when it enters the battlefield, you put a counter on target creature. If that was another creature, so it could be itself, but if it was another one, it gains this ability. When this creature attacks, double the number of counters on it, and it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. So it's like a Naya +1/+1 counters kind of deck. You want to be able to like flicker your commander a bunch to give that doubling effect onto something like a Mana Gorge or Hydra. Doubling counters on that could be really powerful. I'm not super interested in this card itself, but backup as a mechanic seems very odd. When looking around in the rules a little bit further, if you give more activated abilities to Soul Awakener, backup doesn't also give those abilities. It technically just refers to the ability that is written on the card. So you can't really do any cheese there. Backup seems kind of bad ultimately, especially in Commander, where you're just gonna have one of this commander, so it's like a one-time use thing unless you can blink it. I don't know. If I'm missing something about backup, like let me know in the comments. I've been thinking about it for a while and trying to figure out what can you do to make this good, but I haven't found anything. I mean, not that this card's bad, it's fine, but backup as a mechanic seems pretty weak. Kasla, the Broken Halo, another card from the Commander set, and it's Convoke Tribal in Jeskai colors. Super interesting. It's kind of strange that they didn't make this the Teamer one, because it feels a lot more Teamer to have Convoke. But regardless, this card's really good. This card's crazy good. It has Convoke, which is really good for a commander, because then it can help pay for the commander tax by having creatures out, 3 relevant keywords, and whenever you cast another spell with Convoke, scry 2, draw a card. I think if you go a token build, you can play stuff like Our Reckoning, which would be pretty sweet. It's a good Convoke card. Or you can play something like Chief Engineer to give your artifact spells Convoke, and then draw cards off of your artifacts. You can probably kind of storm off if you went with that. Castle's pretty sweet. I think ultimately the card's just like a fun, interesting card. Probably won't be super busted just because it's 6 mana, but I like the card. Also, curious that it's an ally. It doesn't really do anything like other allies do, so kind of strange there. Another sweet card is Ortheon, Hero of Lava Brink. 4 mana, 3/3 human soldier, and it basically makes like a token copy of something, give it haste, and you sack it to the next end step, or you can pay 9 mana to make 5 token copies of another creature. Oh my god. This card is so cool. It reminds me of Flame Shadow Conjuring, you know, something that just lets you make a new token every turn. And this card is crazy with like Cataclysmic Gearhulk, being able to just make a copy of it, and it gets sacrificed, so any death triggers work really well here, like Wormcoil Engine's pretty sweet. And in the late game, if you ever have enough mana to activate that, oh my god, making 5 copies of the Gearhulk, so sweet. This is a really cool commander. This seems like a lot of fun. Super like big splashy value. Definitely an awesome casual commander card. Another awesome casual commander card is Quintus Loremaster. A 5 mana Boros 3/5 with vigilance, and then on your end step, you exile a non-creature non-land card from your graveyard and make a 3/2 spirit. Then pay Boros and 1 tap, sack a spirit, choose target card exiled with Quintus. You may cast it this turn without paying its mana cost. If that spell would be put into a graveyard, put on the bottom of its owner's library instead. This card is a really interesting sort of cheating of spells. It's slow, right? You need to have the spell in your graveyard, play your commander, at the end step exile it, and then activate it next turn, or if you have haste and that spell is an instant, I suppose you could cast it that turn. Really grindy, probably just strong. Not only can this just store up things over time, you can be like, oh, here's a Day of Judgment that's in there now, and then oh hey, now here's a Volcanic Offering, and here is a Fork, and then you kind of stack up this like repertoire of like useful things just over time as you play your Boros control plan, and then you can sort of dig into that, you know, later and grab the cards that you need. It's pretty sweet. I would definitely play a few extra spirits in there just to like make sure your commander has a spirit to sacrifice. This card's really cool, super grindy, super fun, probably great with Sunforger type decks as well. Oh man, Sunforger would be really good here. Palukunos is back. I don't think it's super interesting for commander, this card. Maybe other formats. I'm just kind of amazed at the triple green for 4/5 with reach. There's a 3 mana 4/5 with a keyword. That's crazy stats. That's really big stats. And then it does something as well. 6 and a Phyrexian white to flip it over. And the flip side has reach and lifelink, and then whenever it or another non-token Hydra you control dies, you make a 3/3 Hydra with reach and a 3/3 Hydra with lifelink. So it's kind of like a Wormcoil-esque card. Man, this card is going to be a absolute house in like standard and maybe Pioneer too. Not quite sure if it'll show up in Pioneer, but you can play it in mono green decks because the ability to flip it costs a Phyrexian white. So it doesn't require you to actually be in white. You can just be in mono green. As far as commander goes, it's probably not the best Hydra tribal commander, but I think it's the only Selesnya Hydra tribal commander. So if you're the one person who's been waiting for Selesnya Hydra tribal, then, you know, good for you. Another flip card is Heliod the Radiant Dawn. A 4 mana 4/4, when it enters the battlefield, you return an enchantment that isn't a god from your graveyard to your hand, and then you can pay 3 in a Phyrexian blue to flip it. And then the flip side says you may cast spells as though they had flash, and spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card your opponent have drawn this turn. This card's super funky. It lets you make like really good use of the blue and white cards that make each opponent draw, or your opponents draw just in general. So, you know, imagine you play something that lets each player draw X, and you make each player draw 3. Now, since your opponents have each drawn 3 this turn, your spells cost 9 less. So if you're like an artifact deck, you just drew 3 cards and your spells cost 9 less, you could just dump your entire hand. I wonder if there's some sort of like group hug / artifact storm build here, where you're playing things like Howling Mine to make other players draw extra cards, to make your artifacts cheaper, so you can flash them in for free. I have no idea. This seems like a super like kooky harebrained idea, but I think there is a way to storm off with this in a group hug style, and I think that's really interesting. This card is strange. It's difficult to like assess how good it is, but I think there's a way to like make it really good. Last card I want to talk about is Ciroc and Goreclaw, a 6-mana 6/5 human bear with trample. Other creatures who draw trample, and whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on it. It gains haste until end of turn. This card's actually really good. I'm not super excited for it as a commander, but actually like in the 99 of decks, because it gives everything haste. Well, your non-token stuff haste. There are not that many effects in the game that give all your non-token creatures haste. And this, which is probably just going to be a commander card, is probably going to be a bulk rare when the set comes out, which probably makes it one of the best like budget haste enablers. I know it's like 6 mana, but maybe in some sort of like Primal Surge deck, if you're building on a budget and you don't want to get like a Concordant Crossroads, this would actually be a really great option. So those are 10 cards that I wanted to talk about from the new set so far. Is there anything else from the new set and the commander set that you think I should have mentioned here or I should have talked about? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe for more.